In this episode, I speak to Sue Evans about how leadership is service and the need for trust in leadership. We talk about the staying power of true leaders and how HR have to have staying power to ensure that they remain principled and value-based. Sue discusses the need for true integrity in leadership and the need to stand up for what you believe in for the greater good. And I remark on the need to be also seen to be doing the right thing. We discuss the concept of serve to lead and how military leadership is distributed to leadership and the leadership of UK councils and the impact of COVID on women and leadership. This is an interesting conversation around leadership as a service and whether leadership is really gendered or not. Listen up to the rest of the conversation. Before we begin our conversation, here is a quick shout out to the pathologically curious. Check out the Maverick Paradox magazine. It's a digital magazine written by Mavericks for business owners and professionals. You can find the magazine at themaverickparadox.com. The magazine's aim is to provoke maverick leadership everywhere. Welcome to the Maverick Paradox podcast, where we explore what it is to be a maverick and discover effective modes of leadership. I am Judith Germain, and my mission is to propel the maverick mindset into a world where character and integrity will ultimately have a higher premium than personality and bureaucracy. So thank you for joining me on this journey. If you would like to continue with me, then please subscribe to my podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, or one of the other popular podcast platforms. And today our guest is Sue Evans. Hi, Sue.
Hello, lovely to be here.
I am really pleased that we're sitting there having this conversation because you're an amazing woman.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Well, one to another. It takes one to know one, as they say.
Oh, thank you. So before we kick off, tell us about you.
Well, I've arrived here at the grand old age of 60, sort of having gone what I can only describe as the scenic route through my career. It hasn't been, in my past, I've always I felt slightly hypocritical when I've done any career counselling or given people career advice, because I can only describe my career as a sort of a series of happy accidents. Mm-hmm. So I sort of fell into things because it seemed like a good idea at the time, or it was the next best thing to do. So I went to university. I got a degree in English and drama, and then wasn't really sure what to do. So teaching seemed like a good opportunity. So I trained to be a teacher, and I found myself teaching in a comprehensive school in South London. Quite a challenging environment, and I absolutely loved it. I loved the children, I loved the teaching, and I felt that I was beginning to thrive. But what was in the back of my mind was the idea that I'd been to university, I'd been to school and I'd been to university, and here I was back in a school. And I said to my father, who was a senior RAF officer, I said, yes, this doesn't seem quite right. There must be more to life than this. I felt it as too narrow in terms of my experience. And he said, well, why don't you just join the RAF? Just do 3 years, short service commission, we'd have you. And he said, just meet some different people, do a bit of travelling, and just spread your wings a little bit. So I duly trogged off, thinking that was a good idea, went off to join the RAF, and lo and behold, they said, yes, they'd give me a commission, but only to do air traffic control or admin. Well, as soon as you know me, you would know that neither of those were ever going to be my bag, and I wouldn't have been good at any of them. So I said, no, thank you very much. And the guy who was giving me the feedback, he said, well, you could try the army. He didn't actually say they're slightly less choosy, but that was the inference. Oh. So I rocked up and I signed up and joined the army and found myself quite by accident. I went through selection and I found myself amongst a cohort of the first women to go to the Royal Military Academy, Sandhurst.
Wow.
And they've never had...
That's kind of blaze trailing there.
It was trailblazing. It felt like it because there were 40 of us and 650 of them. And I don't think they really wanted us there. It was some kind of hideous social experiment that I think they'd be quite glad if it failed. So a lot of obstacles were put in our way around that, and it was a very hard, very challenging, and quite demoralising experience in some ways. and you come up against absolute abject sexism and prejudice and stereotyping, and in some cases downright nastiness. And you can do one of two things. You can, as some did, say, actually, do you know what, stuff it, I'm not staying. Or you can think, well, actually, the only way to fight this is from the inside. And so 28 of us finished.
Gosh.
So out of 40, 28 of us marched up the steps of Old College at the Royal Military Academy, Sandhurst, for the first time, and women were commissioned. We couldn't march with the boys because our skirts wouldn't allow us to march a 33-inch pace. And nobody thought to change the skirts. And the parades certainly weren't going to change for women. So they marched us up onto the front of the parade, and we kind of stood out like sore thumbs. And that's how you felt. That's how I felt quite a lot through that training experience. Wow. But I learned so much about myself. I learned so much about being with a very interesting, powerful and influential group of women. And I'm still in touch with all of them. In fact, about once every 6 weeks, we do a Zoom call, and we do get together from time to time. Where we had our 30-year reunion a few years ago. We're gearing up for our 40th anniversary, our 40th reunion. And we are all still in touch and supporting each other. And they are an amazing group of women who have achieved an awful lot between them. And we produced a clutch of senior officers and some people doing some very high-powered jobs. But all of us, I think, richer for that experience, even though it was a pretty grim experience. And in those enlightened days in the army, and I enjoyed being an army officer. I really enjoyed the job. Yeah. I met my husband, and I served. I did a short service commission, so I served. But in those days, you got kicked out when you got pregnant. Oh, and I was married and everything, but as soon as you couldn't get your skirt on, you had to go. So that was that. So I always say I got thrown out of the army. But actually, I was ready to go, ready to do something different. It was a useful experience and a stepping stone to other things. So after that, and after I'd had my children, I went to work for the Fire and Rescue Service, doing leadership development, much more people-focused stuff. So real organisational development type stuff. And I had then a national job with the Fire and Rescue Service, and I went to central government. I was an appalling civil servant. I couldn't get on in the civil service at all. I thought it was
You're too maverick for that, aren't you? Too willfully independent.
Yeah, and I couldn't conform in the way. I didn't like the hierarchy. It was more rank snobbery in the civil service than I ever met in the army.
Wow, no, that is amazing.
And I think that the report that's out now, isn't there a current report? Over the weekend, there's been a report out, hasn't there, about the old boy network and the schools network that operates across the civil service. Doesn't surprise me at all. Because that's exactly my experience in the civil service. And I realised at that point that I'd probably made a career mistake and I needed to sort of move on. So I went to work for Oxfordshire County Council, and that took me into local government. And then I went to Warwickshire County Council. And I finished my full-time career as head of HR and OD at Warwickshire County Council. And I loved being in local government. I love that connection to the community. I love that sense of purpose that you get. No matter what job you're doing in local government, you recognise that you're doing something useful for your community. And I met some really good people. Local government is full of people who work hard, who understand their communities, and who are generous and skilled and equipped to really do some good work. I think if we can keep local government out of the clutches of central government, it would be a better place all round. Because there's a disconnect, I think. I don't think central government quite get the power and influence that local government have, and how well organised it is. And the COVID experience in the last year has shown me that actually local government really can step up. So that's me, really, in a nutshell. But I suppose, at my heart, I'm a teacher. And when I think about the skills that I use daily, it's probably my teaching skills. So all of those leadership things, those things about getting the best from people, encouraging, supporting, coaching, enabling, seeing the best in people, being there to enable people to do their very best work, that comes from my teaching core, I think. My leadership stuff has come, I think, from experience of working alongside good leaders and some poor ones. I'm ashamed to say, and I'm sorry to say, the worst leader I met in my entire life was a woman. And some of the best leaders that I've met in my life have been women. So we can do it both sides of the fence. Fortunately, the ones I've met, sort of my good memories, obviously, are those who've been very good leaders. And their influence has really helped me to understand the importance of the trust, that whole business of trust. I love the trust equation. I think we've talked about that before, where trust is about reliability and credibility and intimacy, so understanding people. And then there's orientation, so that's orientating yourself towards others, what you can do to enable and support others, rather than what can I do about myself, and how's this going to make me look. So that kind of, I think those core skills around teaching and leading are central, absolutely central to me. And to be fair, the army taught me a lot about service and leadership. Leadership is service. Serve to lead is the motto for the army, and it is exactly that. It's a service that you do for people. It's not it's not an add-on. It's not something you do in your spare time. Leadership is service. That's what you do. That's the day job.
Wow, that is so much there. No, that is good, but there's just so much to unpick. So where to begin? So I love the fact, I didn't know that you was quite that mavericky, actually. So I'm very impressed and excited to be having this conversation with you. I almost don't know where to begin. I think the first thing is that, did Sandhurst change you? That experience of being one of 28, so that's quite a high pass mark. And the fact that you had everybody probably willing you to fail, and then you did a good job.
I think I learned that I've got more staying power than I thought I had. If I'm really honest, and I've said this with the girls, we've talked about this quite frequently over the years. If I could have got out of Sandhurst without losing face, I would have done. If I could have walked, I hated it. I thought it was a terrible experience. I couldn't see the point of it most of the time. And I kept thinking, why am I doing this? I've got skills. I'm a good teacher. I can go off and do something else. Why am I making myself do this? And I think there have been times when I thought, do you know what? They can go stick it. I don't want to do this anymore. And then I thought, no, they're not going to get me. I'm going to stay. And I think that staying power was something that I kind of developed because I didn't realise I'd got it. So I think I learned to make the best of my tenacity and my determination not to let somebody get one over me.
I do love that, because leadership is about staying power, because you have to be brave, you have to be courageous, you have to stand up for what you believe in, especially when you're in HR, because you have so many people wanting you to crumble and to move away from what's right. I don't know about you, because the listeners here will know that I was head of HR for many years, and that was probably the defining thing about my HR, was that I wouldn't do something that was against my principles, and I wouldn't do something that was against the greater good. And it took a lot of staying power to do that, because I found, for me, the more senior I got as the companies got bigger, the more likelihood you would be asked to do something that might not quite be unlawful, but it's certainly on the darker grey side of what's right. And you'd have to make a decision and say, you know what, we're not doing that. And it was hard.
Yeah, and I think for me, what came out of that Sandhurst experience and my military experience is integrity. That actually there's something about integrity, that wholeness. So being true to your whole self. And you're right. I think somebody asked you to do something. I'd always say I'd much rather do it right than do the right thing. So I don't like things that I don't like paying lip service to something. I'll do it right because I believe it to be right, and I will stand by my principles. And say, actually, do you know what? I'm gonna stand up. I'm gonna fight this. And at times when I fought things like, when I have been involved in sort of fighting and challenging bullying, for instance, and that's tough. That's a really tough call. But then you think to yourself, actually, for the greater good, I have got to do this. I have got to stand up and say that this is wrong. And at personal cost sometimes, it's personally quite challenging to be able to put yourself in the firing line and go, actually, I'm going to put a marker down here and say, this is not right. I am not going to put up with it.
Yeah, and, integrity is certainly a thing there, but it's also about being seen to do the right thing. I remember working, I think I was 24, my first HR job, and I was the second most senior person, and I worked in a retail organisation. I remember coming in early in the morning, it must have been about 7:30, and there was a huge crowd of people on right near the warehouse, and I was like, like your heart starts to sink, and you're like, it's kicking off. It's too late for me to go home. So I'm walking towards it, and there's like the night shift manager shouting at the day shift manager. And there's like two big guys. I'm 5'7", and these guys are 6'3" and 6'4", and you can tell they're about to start punching each other. I kind of start to walk past, because like the crowd opens, I start to walk past, and I get probably a foot past them, and everything in me is like, I have to deal with it. I can't be head of HR and walk past this, and I'm really scared. So I stand in the middle of the two of them, put my hand out and say, I don't care what's going on. You over there, you my office, see you in 10 minutes. And I'm like quaking. Yeah. And it was but the thing is like the men just immediately just calmed down and like shuffled off and came, and it was just fine. But it was in that moment, it was that kind of, do I stand by my principles and do something about it, or do I take the easy route and just scuttle off?
And that's it, isn't it? You don't cross the road. You don't cross the road on the other side, and you get stuck in. And people say, I mean, you do get involved in all sorts of situations, both in work and outside of it. But that's because it's ingrained in me not to walk away from trouble, but to walk towards it and to do what you can to help. Yeah. So you kind of, you wouldn't just ignore something if something's happening. So if somebody was having a go at somebody in the street, I'm more than likely to step in. My kids will go, Mum, no, don't get involved, don't join in. But actually, I won't stand by and let that happen to anybody else. So there is that innate, almost an innate sense of putting things right and not walking by.
Maverick leaders have got a very strong sense of justice, and that gets Maverick leaders in a lot of trouble, because a lot of companies don't want people to have a strong sense of justice. No, which is unfortunate. No. Tell me more about the concept of serve to lead. What exactly does that mean?
I think that's because when the Army are very, very good, and I have to say the Army is very good at leadership development, leadership training, and that is the real focus of what they do through Sandhurst. So when you go through that course, that is the main focus of the course, is actually training you to be a good leader. And that at the core of that is the idea that your military service isn't about being being a teacher or being a doctor or being a gunner or being an engineer or whatever. That the core of your military service is leadership, and therefore you serve to lead. But of course, that brings with it that kind of requirement around the whole servant leadership concept, which is that you are serving and supporting those people that you're leading. So you're doing a service for them. So it generates a kind of a feeling of being generous, of generosity, of giving, of supporting and enabling and empowering others to be the best they can be. It's not about you, it's about them. And on one level, it is all about you because it's how you do that. Yeah. But actually, on another level, it's not about you at all. It's about what you do for others. And I think that's a really important concept.
Yeah.
And I think that you don't, I don't sit every day and think, okay, what sort of leader am I going to be today? I've been very lucky to be able to have I think I've got a fairly natural style. I'm quite outgoing naturally. And I think that comes out. But that core learning that we did was around, you are there to make sure that you get the best out of those people that you're leading. You enable them to do their very best work.
Yeah, I like that. And I think that's the job of everybody in an organisation, whether you have a formal title of leadership or not. And I think that's part of the whole philosophy around Maverick leadership, is that everybody's a peer, whether they're the person sweeping up or the director of the company. You're all peers, and you should treat everybody in that way. You know, it's interesting, this serve to lead. I can totally get it. But I sort of historically, people see that kind of concept as a feminine way of leading. So it's really interesting to say that's the army's way, which you see still very male orientated. So when you went into corporate life working with that kind of mentality, did you stand out as somebody that's leading differently, especially as being a senior woman?
I think it's interesting, isn't it? Because you talk about different leadership styles, and I think that there's room for all sorts of different leadership styles. I always think, as I say to people, I don't care what your leadership style is as long as you've got one. And I don't think it's about you. It's, you know, I suppose people would imagine that the army has got this kind of macho leadership style where you're leading from the front and you're out there, and but actually a lot of it isn't like that. A lot of it, and the army has got very well distributed leadership, so through its teams. So you've got leadership at every level. So your lance corporals and your sergeants and your senior ranks actually have as much leadership responsibility as some of the officers. So it's well distributed leadership across the military. But I think that it isn't gender specific either.
No.
Because you can get some very, very, and I think there's something about empathy. There is something about that compassionate leadership and supportive leadership, which I think you can do, whether you're a strong character or whether you're a quieter character. It's that genuine interest in people. And I don't think that is gender specific. I think women are inherently more nosy or more likely to ask about details and are less squeamish, I think, sometimes about asking about feelings. That doesn't say men can't do it. And there are, you know, good male role models who do it. But there is something, I think, whereas women can get away with that. Well, how do you feel about that? What do you think about that? You know, well, how does that make you feel? Or how, you know, are you okay with that? And are more likely to get a response. Whereas I think there is something about male to male relationships where they wouldn't necessarily admit that. They might now in this day and age, but 30, 40 years ago, it's rare.
Yeah, I think that's interesting because in my book, The Maverick Paradox, Secret Power Behind Successful Leaders, I looked at socialized mavericks, which are the mavericks that I say you can bring out in polite company. You know, they work for the greater good. They're not ego driven. And I make the comment in the book that you don't see as many male socialized mavericks as you do with females, on the basis that the ones that are out there, and there are many, there are thousands of them out there, but they have traditionally been seen as odd and weird by other male leaders because they have the empathy, because they have the human impact that they're interested in, and the fact that they're ethical, principled, and work for the greater good, that they've been seen as too much of a feminine style. Because I'm much like you, I don't believe there's such a thing as a male and female way of leading. I think that's just really silly to imagine it. But I do recognise that, you know, those managers who are male who say, but what about this? You know, there's redundancies happening, but how's that going? You know, how's the staff going to feel about that? Other men look at them like, I don't get it. It's going to save us so much money. You know.
And I think it's been really interesting right the way through COVID and looking at what's the impact of this. It has impacted disproportionately on women who still probably are carrying the lion's share of domestic responsibilities in the home.
Yeah. So
working at home, and I'm quite careful with our staff to distinguish between working from home and working at home. Because it implies a choice. If you're working from home, the chances you've chosen to do that and you've got arrangements in place that allow you to do that. Working at home means that your home life and your working life collide. And I think those people that have survived this and thrived have been those who've been able to really manage that well.
Yes.
And that, to a certain extent, I think women have shouldered most of the responsibility for childcare, for homeschooling, for the domestic arrangements, for caring responsibilities. And it's fallen naturally, I think. And so when you come back to thinking about leadership, that's, I think, again, there's something about empathy and about, I think women are more likely to get that than men. Some men will get it. I don't want to generalize, but on the whole, I think women who've brought up, women leaders who've brought up families, who have been in that position where you've had to juggle childcare and you've had to juggle domestic arrangements with your home life. I think there's an empathy there that you wouldn't get, where, there were times in my career when I thought, well, I really need a wife. I've got a brilliant husband. Brilliant husband. Well, I really need a wife.
Well, there is that thing that they say that highly successful women leaders, CEOs and stuff, tend to have an army of people doing the house, teaching children and all that stuff behind them so that they can get ahead.
Yeah. And I think we were talking about this on our round table for International Women's Day, that actually there's no shame in saying I need a bit of help here. And I've never been too proud to have somebody come and help me in the house, because actually I'm doing a job and I'm bringing up a family and we're running a home, and my husband was working. So, and whilst my husband is very good, we're a really good team, and he's domesticated and extremely good. there's something about that kind of those responsibilities which still sit with me, and I'm still a bit house proud, and I'm still a bit. My kids say I've got OCD. I haven't. I'm just tidy. and admitting that I needed a bit of help with that, and having somebody come in to help clean the house, on a weekly basis, and some help around the house. It's a good thing to admit, really, that you can't do it. We can't do it all. Well, you can, but you break.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I've got a question. I'm just curious, really, because I don't know the answer. You've spent a lot of time in lots of different councils. Do councils have a kind of equal gender split in employees, or is it skewed to females?
Skewed to females.
Yeah,
skewed to females until you get to senior levels, and then it's skewed to males.
Okay, well, that's pretty common in lots of industries, isn't it?
Yeah, we are seeing, though, increasingly gender balanced senior leadership cohorts. So actually, I think West Sussex is very good. There's a very good balance of men and women across West Sussex. I think that other councils are less so. We're now seeing some very, very good female CEOs and chief execs who are great, and who really, really bring a lot to the sector. But you'll still see that shift in gender balance. We take a lot of women in, but we promote a lot of men still.
Yeah, that's fairly common. I mean, I do a lot of work around diversity of thought, inclusive leadership, that kind of thing. And the business case is quite clear that you need a diverse group of individuals, and that doesn't necessarily mean diversity in gender or even of ethnicity, because you could have all women all thinking the same way, or all, so
absolutely.
It is
absolutely.
Really
and we know that diversity makes sense. We know that good organisations are able to embrace a diversity of perspectives. And you're right, it's not about gender or race or any of those things, but it is about that diversity of thinking and thinking differently together, which is one of my favourite expressions. So actually getting a diverse board is a board with a diverse range of experiences, and that's social experiences, that's racial experiences, that's gender experience, the whole lot. So the more diverse the board, the better the quality of thinking and decision making, I think. And we are getting much better. Local government, I think, is looking good. We've opportunities for different people to be promoted is good. We've still got some work to do to make sure that comes through at every level.
Yeah, I'm having worked with a few councils in my own consultancy around supporting leadership development, even through COVID. I was really impressed with the councils that I was working with, just how easy it was for them to just shift into this new gear and go, okay, right, this is what we're doing. Even better than a lot of private companies. When you think of the size of a council, the budgets, the people.
But what we forget is that councils have got very good experiences under their belts. Councils dealt with foot and mouth. Councils dealt with major flooding. If you look at all the major flooding events over the last 10, 15 years, that's been your local council that have responded. So look at the flooding in Oxfordshire, the flooding that happened. Foot and mouth, massive operations to manage, big public health incidents, big catastrophic incidents for our communities. And that experience is squirreled away, and they've learned from it. So when it came to COVID, actually, the wherewithal was there. And what we've said is this hasn't brought out the best in people. It's just shone a light on what's already there. There are good people. And I absolutely stand by that. I'm so proud to work in local government. And I'm on the periphery now because I'm doing an interim role. And I have been doing it for the last sort of 13, 14 months. And it's been a fantastic experience. I'm very proud to be part of it, because the ability to step up, to see what's needed, to get on and do it has been phenomenal. The effort has been phenomenal. And I think that, we're all out clapping the NHS. I think that local government is the unseen hero of COVID.
I think COVID has shown us a number of sort of heroes that people have not realised. And all the complexity, it's like, these people are amazing.
And to bring people together in different ways, to free up people to go and do different things. We move people around really quickly. We move people around, to take up to movement, and the agility. I think that we've shown this to ourselves to be flexible and agile throughout this, and to be able to respond to that and to step up to the ask. And it was a big ask, and it continues to be. There's still a lot of effort going into COVID across councils. There's all sorts of things happening now that are really, being led by local councils, which is great.
Tell me about women in leadership. Is there more that should be done to get more women in leadership, or do you think there's no need to do anything specific anymore?
No, I think the opportunities are there. I think some of the barriers are put there by women themselves.
Tell me more about that.
I think there's a big challenge in some of the self-limiting beliefs.
Okay.
And that stuff that stops women from taking the next step. I'm too busy. I've got too much on. Crikey, can I? And women do suffer disproportionately from imposter syndrome. We've all been there, haven't we? I mean, I've sat at a new desk in a new office thinking, crikey, why did they give me that job?
I have never had imposter syndrome, but then that's probably because I'm a maverick. I've never experienced I shouldn't be here, or I don't deserve to have this.
I think, oh my God, sooner or later someone's going to realise I'm no good at this.
But it might well be that everything I did, I was the youngest, only female, only person of colour. On the senior team. So I think I probably didn't have time to have that feeling because I was too busy fighting the next thing.
And it's fairly fleeting, but everybody, I'm sure most people have it. And this idea that, I couldn't possibly do that job. And I think we need to, some of those self-limiting beliefs, I think we've got to really encourage women to recognise that they can go to the top, and they can, but you don't have to have it all. I think it comes back to that business of, you can get there, but you might need to admit that maybe for this time, you're not going to be really good at that. You're not going to be able to do this as well, and that maybe you need some help with this bit. And also to allow yourself to admit where you need additional help and support. And I do think we should invest much, much more in coaching. And I think the other thing is, it's the attitude to coaching. We tend to still think about coaching as one of those things that you do because there's a problem. rather than coaching for strength and saying, right, you're really good at that, let's give you some coaching to make you even better at that. Whereas what we'll tend to do is go, well, you're really good at that, you're really good at that. Well, you could do a bit of coaching in that because you're not that good. And actually, I think we need to learn to say that bit doesn't really matter, but we'll give you some coaching to get you really, really good at this bit. And if you think about sports coaching, that's how sports coaching gets on, isn't it? You know, you wouldn't take Owen Farrell and go, well, you're a really good kicker. He's a rugby, just in case everyone doesn't know who he is. He's the captain of the England rugby team. And he's really good at kicking the ball, and they've coached him to be really good at kicking the ball, and they keep coaching him to be really good at kicking the ball and to be a good leader. What they don't say is, oh, you're really good at that, but we'll give you some coaching so you can also be good at doing something else on the rugby field. So why can't we recognise that let's coach for strength, and that actually 2 or 3 strengths is enough and the rest is good enough?
Is it an investment thing? Is it that, because I know certainly in the past, if it's not mandatory training, then you won't, you only get other training because you've been a good boy or a good girl, so here's your well done, we can't give you a pay rise, here's a book of courses, pick one and we'll send you on that.
I think the world's moved on a bit from that. I rather hope so, because I think the budgets haven't been there to do that. But I do think we're not strengths-based enough yet. We're starting to get there. We're starting to get there. But I think a strengths-based approach would be allowing people to really recognise people's strengths, and recognising, particularly when you're building teams, to recognise where those strengths are and where people make their best contribution, and coach them in that, and then look for somebody else who contributes differently. Now, that's how you increase diversity too. Yes. And I think that's the key. For me, that feels like the key to increasing diversity. No?
Yeah, that's right. I mean, I help people look at their Maverick impact. So it's very similar, isn't it? It's like it's all around improving the impact, the contribution that you're making, as opposed to always beating at somebody about deficiency, because that deficiency, and I say it in inverted commas, may not even be that important for what they're currently doing. Because and I think that sometimes there's little discernment as to what really is important for a particular role.
Yeah, or it might not matter. It might not matter that that's not your strength, because it might be somebody else in your team who does have that strength, and that's their opportunity to shine. That's their opportunity to play to their strengths. But at the moment, we're still a bit hung up on this being a good all-rounder. Good breadth, and being able to be good at everything, be able to do all of it. And actually, I'm not sure that that's relevant anymore.
That's true. And also, you do run the risk of people becoming bored and disengaged in their roles.
And generally speaking, people will enjoy and will be very good at things they kind of like doing. So if we played up to that, and I'm not saying that you can't be excused duties on a load of stuff, and you do have to know enough of it. But I think if we were more strengths based, if we were more focused around, let's really look across this team and see who's good at what. Okay, right, that's your strength. That's what this team looks to you to do that. That builds trust, that builds confidence. And then you have a leader who kind of then coordinates that. So you don't need to be good at everything.
Yeah, I agree. I remember when I was employed, I've been hired into this new team and this new HR team, and looking at it, and there was a particular member of staff that just wasn't working. And I watched her for a bit, and I thought, she's a very clever person, but I just don't think she's happy. And then so we started looking at. So I spoke to her manager and said, what are you doing about this individual? And they were like, well, nothing really, because she's like a mum, and everyone goes there for problems, and she's great. And I thought, that's great, but we're not paying her to be mum to the team. So come back with they didn't come back with anything, and I just sort of said, well, let's look at the roles. And there was one part of, she was very good, and she cared so much about why people weren't at work. And I said, okay, why don't we just put her in charge of absence or the monitoring or the suggestion or everything to do with absence? Let her do that, and we reshuffle everybody else's work and take all that aspect out so she could do that. And she thrived, and she came up with all these new ideas and concepts and all sorts of things. She was absolutely amazing. Yeah. And it just turned out because the other parts of HR she just wasn't interested in that.
Yeah, and that's a win, isn't it? That's a real win. You can't always do that. You can't always do it. And there are aspects of every job that you kind of think, oh, I've got to do that, and you just have to do it. But I do think that there's room for us to be much more overt about strengths-based working, about saying, okay, who's really good at that? Well, let's let them get really, really good at that. And also then empower them to do the creative stuff around that, because they'll have some idea. You're right, they'll have ideas, they'll have creative thinking going on around, that could be really good at that. That could be like this.
But that calls for courage from the leaders.
Yeah.
To be able to stand up against the hierarchy and say, actually, this is the way I'm going to run the department, because this is the best use of the resources that I have.
Yeah.
And this will keep them aligned and engaged.
There is some risk in that, isn't there?
Yeah, because they need to be, it comes back to education, isn't it? They need to have the skills to be able to do that. And if they have come up through an organisation or some similar roles, they may not have seen it. So I found that quite often when I was going into new HR departments, coming from a background of operational HR in a retail environment, that a lot of the teams had not seen how HR could be a business partner, how HR could understand the business, because they'd not seen it in any of the companies they've worked with. So you had to role model it, explain it, demonstrate to say, well, this is how HR is to serve the business by understanding the business, not by giving loads of reports. That's just one aspect. You know what? I think this is a good place to stop, unless you're sitting there, Sue, and you go, I can't believe she didn't ask me this because she's a crazy woman. Or is there anything that you want to say? So this is your opportunity.
Only that I would say to any woman who's sitting sort of in middle career stream, thinking, what do I do next? I'd go, just put yourself out there and give it a go.
I like that.
What's the worst that can happen? You can fail at something. I can remember I met a lovely guy. I worked with it was a very nice man. He was a very, very kind and gifted teacher. And there was a job in the offing in the organisation. And I went, I'm not going to apply for it because I won't get it. They're not going to give that to me. I said, no, and I've never failed an interview. I don't want to start now. And he said, well, you know what they say? He said, those who've never failed anything have never really tried.
Oh, but that got you going.
And I thought, oh, right, okay. So I had a go at the job. I didn't get it, of course, but I learned a lot in the process. And he said, the thing is, what you've done, he said, is you put a flag up to say you're interested in what comes next and you're interested in moving forward. And he said, there's a bit of experience behind you. So when another job came up, I applied for it and I got it. And there is something about that, giving it a go and not being afraid to stick your head up the parapet and have a go and not be afraid to fail.
Yeah.
But obviously then be prepared to learn from that. And I think sometimes women are more fearful of failure than they need to be.
Yeah, I think so. And I think, it's only more recently that you can, I remember when I first started working for myself and wanting to get, stock images on leaders, and there were always men. You couldn't find a female leader if you try, and and I think it's about what you see. If it wasn't for programs, this is showing my age now, like Cagney and Lacey and Juliet Bravo and things like that, you wouldn't imagine a female cop. You had to see it to imagine it, and I think that's quite a lot to do with it.
Yeah.
Oh, so
the other message, and just the final message is that you don't have to be anything but yourself.
Yeah.
And if you find yourself in a situation where you are having to be anything but yourself, you're in the wrong place.
I do love that. One, because it's a very Maverick thing to say, but two, it's so disheartening to be something that you're not, and it's not sustainable. No. You will crack up at some point.
It's exhausting. So if you're in a place where you're having to be something that does not allow you to just be yourself, so you can relax with that and be confident about who you are, go somewhere else, because they don't deserve you and they won't appreciate you. So if you're having to change yourself in order to fit in somewhere, it's the wrong hole. Go and find something different to do. Go find someone that will appreciate and allow you to be who you are, because that's the only way you're going to then be allowed to play to your strengths. Because it's hard enough without trying to be somebody different, not to be something you're not.
True, and I think the leader's job is to enable or empower everyone to be themselves.
Yeah, absolutely.
And still be aligned to the organisation.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think good leaders recognise that real richness that comes from having a diverse group of people around you, people who are different. And I think that's really important, and not shoehorn, expecting everybody to look the same, sound the same, do the same. Difference. Let's celebrate difference. Hey.
I agree. Thank you so much, Sue. Would you come back again if I go, I want to talk about this now? Will you come back?
Yeah, no, it's lovely. It's always lovely to talk to you. It's always lovely to talk to you, because actually it feels like a proper conversation. It's not just, it's real. So delighted, absolutely delighted.
Brilliant. Thank you.
My pleasure. Lovely to talk to you. Jude, please stay in touch, because I love talking to you. So we must do this more often.
Definitely.
Okay, you take care.
Thanks. Bye.
Thanks for your time. Bye.
Thank you once again for tuning in to the Maverick Paradox podcast. I hope you have enjoyed listening to my conversation with Sue as much as I enjoyed having it. At the Maverick Paradox, we improve your impact and influence by enabling you to effectively strategize, innovate, and execute. To find out more, contact us at judith@maverickparadox.com. Thank you. Are you interested in Maverick leadership but unsure how to apply it? We can help. Judith Germain has collaborated with David Chislett to produce a 12-part video series on Maverick leadership and how to apply it to your creative thinking skills. This will truly get you thinking and putting into action your ability to innovate and execute, truly changing your outcomes. Check out the show notes for the link or contact us on judith@maverickparadox.com for more information. If you are pathologically curious and would love to find out more about the Maverick Paradox, then please subscribe to this podcast on one of the popular podcast platforms. Alternatively, you could explore our resources on Mavericks at maverickparadox.com or read the Maverick Paradox magazine. We publish frequently each week. If you subscribe, you will get our monthly newsletter. And let's not forget my book, The Maverick Paradox, The Secret Power Behind Successful Leaders. For those that love a good discussion, you could apply to join our exclusive Facebook group. Finally, if you would like to work with us or are interested in the Maverick at work, check out maverickparadox.co.uk.